The W15 rolled onto the Silverstone circuit for its shakedown the other day, which prompted much scrutiny and ogling from rivals and fans alike. After previous years featuring DAS and the Zeropod concept, it should really come as no surprise that Mercedes has brought along a few concepts that toe the line between revolutionary and illegal. However, it is yet to be seen as to the extent of the uproar a controversial new front wing design will create, as realistically it all hinges on whether or not it succeeds in making the car faster, as to whether the teams will actually care about it. Alongside reveals of some of the new concepts, as let's be real here, no team is showing their full designs until at least testing, if not saving the fully believed concept until free practice in Bahrain, opting to use testing to focus on individual components rather than the full package. There has also been talks of limiting factors and tempered expectations. Add to this the fact that even though he is still at the team, this is the first step to life without Hamilton, as getting this year right is integral to the 2025 season and thus the momentum into the new regulations. All in all then, certainly a lot to get into as the final week of car launches reaches its conclusion. Want to know what has held Mercedes back this winter? It's to be expected when you redesign a car in its entirety, but just how much damage could it do this season? And stick around because a certain advisor couldn't help but pour salt in some still fresh wounds. So a complete overhaul of the gearbox, chassis and aero package of a car seems to really take its toll, eh? Or at least, that's what Mercedes technical director James Allison is indicating when talking about the challenger that the Brackley team has put forward for this coming season. In an interview following the launch of the car, Allison was quick to say that the architectural changes and the costs involved have had a knock-on effect to the efficacy of the overall package, as he said. A new chassis and gearbox was standard for each year pre-budget cap. The latter usually forces you to choose, but there are teams like us who have opted to change both. There's no doubt that having a new outer casing of the gearbox and, at the same time, having a new chassis are two big projects that take a part of our financial means. This means that other parts of the car we have not pushed as much in development. It would seem that Mercedes are approaching the upcoming season in a similar way to others like Aston Martin and McLaren, where building a solid foundation, perhaps going to the extreme in Mercedes' case by sacrificing elements that they may be able to upgrade through the season, ultimately increases the ceiling which subsequent developments can reach. Allison would go on to say that despite the limitations of the budget cap being felt, the team is still satisfied with their starting position. I feel like we delivered on all the things we said we wanted to. Some aspects are unlimited and therefore you can never be fully satisfied. However, we don't know until we actually get the machine moving, but I think we can say that we feel like we've done a good job. F1 is a relative game. Whether we have worked well enough to be competitive, only time will tell. We don't know what everyone else did. The technical director would emphasize the team's improvements in the areas where the drivers were most vocally dissatisfied last year, starting with the quote, unpredictable rear axle in order to ensure that the drivers are confident enough with the car to get every millisecond out of the sectors they otherwise struggled with last year. As well as this, they've focused on performance in the corners as well as making a less draggy car, which will further help both the drivers inside the helmet as well as on track. Something Lewis Hamilton will be pleased to hear about is the placement of the driver has changed, and while only by 10 centimeters, this was one of Hamilton's most frequent and vocal complaints of the Mike Elliott design that preceded the W15. Undoubtedly too, the W15 is a good looking car, far less of a bulk than the last year's car and far more conventional than the year before. However, the thing that got the whole paddock talking wasn't the look of the car, but rather an element on the front wing. The wing harkens back to the pre-2022 front wings, which saw detached elements being a mainstay essential of the front aero package, with what has been coined a legality wire, which to us sounds like having a poison-free pizza on your menu, being the talk of the town following the reveal and subsequent shakedown of the W15. The top element of the wing is attached to the nose cone by a carbon wire, made up of two parts in order to comply with the FIA regulations surrounding front wings, which it's assumed will drastically free up the air moving through the front portion of the car and thus make the air entering the underside of the car far less disrupted and dirty. What on the surface looks looks like a small, aesthetically pretty yet menial change could potentially be game-changing. This is due to the current era of regulations relying on the underside of the car for traction by using the ground effect. If you're able to ensure that the air moving to the underside of the car is as clean and undisrupted as possible, then you can more easily reap the rewards of the ground effect phenomenon that the current era regulations are built around. While there is still a lot to be done after the first half meter of the car, it certainly puts the W15 in an advantageous position to reap the full rewards of the air entering the underside of the car. When paired with the nose length and position being drastically altered, moving it away from the main plane and opening up more space at the front of the car for air to enter, it could be said that Mercedes have put such massive emphasis on the architectural changes to the chassis to distract from the minutiae that could make all the difference. There is certainly a big red elephant in the room, however, something that Helmut Marko was all too happy to point out, in that the developments this year may be hindered by one side of the garage being cut adrift and unable to apply itself to innovations moving forwards. Pouring salt into the wound, Marko had this to say. Wolff said not too long ago that he was so close to Hamilton that no piece of paper could fit in between the two. To which he brutally went on to say, but a Ferrari contract would. I can really just imagine him kicking his feet and giggling with glee at the opportunity for barbs that the situation has now opened up to the Red Bull advisor. Helmut would go on to say, I see it as weakening Mercedes. Whether it strengthens Ferrari remains to be seen. Overall, this has an incredible impact, right down to the stock market prices. It's great that something is happening. The key acknowledgement Marko had about the situation was the potential short-term weakening to any innovations that Mercedes may be able to bring. Normally, in a situation like this, your mind is already more focused on the new team. The current team cannot let him take part in any serious innovations because he would of course take them with him. The whole thing is excellent for sports, better than Netflix. It completely surprised me too, a sporting sensation, especially the timing. One wonders how this came about. Mercedes was overtaken by Ferrari in the second half of 2023, and McLaren was also faster. Maybe Hamilton noticed something that the outside world doesn't yet know. However, that last point is something which should be taken with a pinch of salt, given that the first time Hamilton stepped foot into the sim to test this season's car was the day that the announcement happened, on February the 2nd, according to Toto Wolff. However, just because he is not repulsed by the current car doesn't mean Marko isn't onto something here. Hamilton was vocally dissatisfied with the direction of the team in the previous 2 years, with him making it clear that he had not felt listened to. While many may point to this as entitled behavior, there is a certain amount of attention that should be paid to the comments of a 7-time world champion, especially when the upcoming W15 has been implemented with some of Hamilton's loudest complaints, such as the seating position in the car. Toto Wolff made it clear in his speech at the car's release that expectations are to be tempered and realistic goals set, perhaps either the result of being stung over the past couple of seasons or a potential return to the classic Mercedes sandbagging seen over the last decade. The target is to do a good job, look inwards like I said, try to have a car on track that is predictable, that has lots of downforce, a strong engine, and just do a solid job, deliver on our targets. That is what we would like to achieve, to give a car to Lewis and George that they enjoy driving, and not as difficult as the previous years. And hopefully in Bahrain in a week's time we will have more good feedback than bad, but I'm really looking forward to have that car out on track.